All right, y'all already know what time it is. I like these. It's really hot outside, so we're gonna be doing a lot of this for a while. So today we're gonna talk about standards versus preferences. I talked about this before. I made a video about this before, but it's weird because I didn't have time to do it, so I kind of rushed myself. And I honestly don't know how much time I have to make this video now because I don't like making videos when people are home. And usually the driveway's full of cars, so I don't really have space to do it anyway. All right, so we're going to talk about standards and preferences today. Before I begin talking about this, I want you guys to understand that both standards and preferences are based on what you value as a person and what you want to prioritize. We'll get into that in a minute. So for a standard, standards they're not negotiable. They're non-negotiable. They can't be measured on a scale, right? You either meet the standard or you don't. That's what a standard is, right? Very simple. And I'll give you an example. All right. Okay, let's do another car one. I mean, this is Garage Talks after all. All right. So let's say the speed limit is 40. Okay. You're going 40, right? That's the speed limit. If you go above the speed limit, that's breaking the law. It's for safety, right? Obviously. So if you break that 40, then you're going to go over and break the law, right? So there's a standard for a reason, right? Now, let's say, for example, someone is injured and they need to go to the hospital, like they're about to die, right? So you get them in your car and you book it, right? Chances are you're not going to follow the, speed limit. You're going, right? So are you still breaking the law? Even though you're trying to save a life, are you still breaking the rules, right? Is it still wrong? The answer is yes. Not saying that I wouldn't do that, because if something happened to my niece or nephew, I'm speeding off, to the hospital, no doubt, right? The reason I'm saying this is because if something is only right half the time, right, then there is no standard. There's no such thing as right and wrong, and there's no order to it, right? So that's a standard, non-negotiable. There's zero tolerance, right? Now, a preference is a little different. Using the same analogy, but a different country. So Germany they don't really have a speed limit. You can go as fast as you want, which I think is amazing. And at that point, it's like how fast you drive is purely based on your preference, how comfortable you are driving at certain speeds, So in that case, it is up to you, right? How fast you want to drive. It's based on your preference. Now, just because you can go 120 miles an hour doesn't mean you should, right? But you could. It's the option's there. So that's a preference, and it could be measured on a scale, right? How fast do you want to go? Yeah, so it's like you really have to know the difference between the two, because going into something that I think more people can apply this to is relationships, right? When you pick a partner that you want to be with, a lot of people have standards, but they confuse what a standard is to a preference. And you can't really get mad at a preference because it's subjective. And like I said before, a standard and a preference, they're both subjective in their own right. It depends on what you value. I'll get personal for a second. Personal preference for me. No, we'll start with standards. We'll go in order. A standard for me is, when I'm looking for a partner, is sharing the same beliefs, right? So sharing the same beliefs is really important to me. And if you don't meet that standard, then I don't see it working out. You know what I mean? Another standard that I have is family oriented, right? So if you're not family oriented, because I want to have a family, I want kids in the future, so if I'm around somebody that doesn't want kids, then that is a deal breaker for me. That's yeah. And a preference is not a deal breaker, right? And we're going to get into that in a second, right? But those standards are there's only two, really, very basic. I don't have a list of things going on, you know what I mean? But that's my standard, right? Just got those two, just two. Now, when it comes to preference, right? For me, I prefer somebody who is on the creative side, whether it's playing an instrument, singing, maybe you can dance a little bit, or maybe you do photography like me, or videography, or maybe you know how to write really well, because I'm a writer. There's a fly that's really bothering me, maybe poetry, or how to you have a way with words or something like that. I'm a writer. It's probably why, part of the reason why I make these videos. And for some reason, I'm attracted to handwriting. I don't know why that's a thing. That's just a preference though, right? And like I said before, preferences can be measured on a scale. I'll take another preference, for example, because it's kind of hard to measure. Sorry, I got people texting me. It's kind of hard to measure art because it's so broad, and there's different disciplines of art, and they can all be measured within their own right. So it's a little too broad. So I'm gonna go into talk about another preference that I have, and it's cooking. I like food, so when it comes to cooking as a preference, you can measure that on a scale. I'll do it this way: on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 through 3 is like putting something together without cooking, like making a sandwich or putting together a salad, picnic style kind of, 1 through 3, okay? And then 4 through 5 is like you can use the oven, toaster oven, you can make things, you can bake things, not everything, but it's very simple. And then like 5 to like 7, you know how to cook like the basic stuff like pasta, rice, like things that most people, when they say they can cook, would cook, and then you got your levels from like 8 to 10, right, where you're actually, you know how to season your food, you know how to like do a dry rub, you know how to do like a marinade. You're over here grilling things, and you're using the stove and like other things, and like you have the correct tools and like all that other stuff, like crazy stuff, right? So there's levels to it, right? On a scale, it's like, so a preference could be measured in that aspect where it's like, and it's completely, for the most part, in your control. If it's something that you can't control, like maybe your hair color, or like maybe your height, or whatever, your eye color, even, like it doesn't matter, right? I just focus on those two things for me, for preferences, because I can do that, right? I'm an artistic type, and I can cook pretty decent. I say I'm a level 7, right? And the cool thing about it is, if I end up with somebody who doesn't know how to cook, that's fine, because I can be that person for the both of us. Same thing with being the creative type, right? If you're not the creative type, that's okay, because I can be that person for the both of us, right? Now, when it comes to standards, I believe what I believe, right? But I can't make you believe what I believe. So when it comes to sharing beliefs, you have to have that for yourself, right? We have to have that thing in common. Family oriented. It wouldn't make sense for me, who's family oriented, to be with someone who's not, and then end up having kids, because that causes trouble, that causes problems, like, even though I'm married, because my partner's not family oriented, right, I'm over here raising the kids by myself, because that person's not as family oriented as I am, and maybe they don't value family relationships as much as I do. And it doesn't make sense, because that puts you in a very bad spot, choosing someone who, has your preferences but doesn't meet your standards. And that's what we're going to talk about next, is like what happens when you find someone that doesn't meet your standard. And it's like, well, if someone doesn't meet your standard, it's simple. You just don't go for someone like that. Doesn't matter how good they look, or doesn't matter how well they cook, or how artistic they are, right? If they don't meet that standard, then it's not a relationship. I think it's not a relationship worth having. And then when standards conflict, right? Let's say she's a really good family-oriented person, but we don't share the same beliefs, right? So she meets one standard but not the other. So then at that point you prioritize, right? What do you value more in a person? Sharing the same beliefs, or settling down on having a family with this person, right? So it goes that way in terms of standards when they conflict with each other. But when it comes to preferences, it shouldn't really matter at all, right? Because like I said, if you don't have any of those preferences I mentioned, for me, then it's not a total deal breaker, right? And the reason I bring that up is because people have it switch, they flip it. People don't understand that some standards shouldn't be looked at as standards, and some preferences shouldn't be looked at as standards either. Because when you have something like that, things get too confusing, and then people get too discouraged to like come up and ask you out or whatever, because, and most of it is due to social media, in the world where comparison takes precedence over truth and reality, right? It's really hard, because a lot of people, for their standards, want something from somebody that's completely out of that person's control, right? For example, I know a lot of guys, and it kind of annoys me when people talk about this, or nothing against blondes with blue eyes, right? But because that's the standard of beauty in America, is like blonde with blue eyes, right? I get kind of like, I feel weird about it when my guy friends always tell me that's their standard, like, and it's like, is that really all there is to your standard? Like, there's no depth to it. There's nothing else. Like, that's really what you value the most in somebody, right? And when I asked them, like, what matters more to you, looks or personality, they always say personality. At that point, it's like you're lying to yourself, right? Or you're not being real with yourself when you're saying stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, just there's no depth to your person, to your character. I feel like if you're being superficial in that matter, that says more about you, right, and your character than it does about the person that you're trying to look for. That right there, physical appearance shouldn't be a standard at all. That should be a preference, sure. And then your standard should be something more important. That wouldn't really make any sense. Like, put them in the proper categories. And if people like thought about it that way, if more people thought that way about, in general, about people, I feel like we'd be better off, in terms of trying to find a partner, in the dating scene, because, a lot of people are too scared to date because no one can get their preferences and standards squared away. You know what I mean? For me, I'm a realist, right? I would like to think I am, right? So when it comes to standards, I don't really look at, physical appearance. Now, physical well-being, like physical health, is a little different. For example, I like to go for runs, right? And I'm not saying that I'm looking for a partner that runs, but if I want to spend time with this person, it'd be great if they can keep up with me on a run, But at that point, is that really a standard, or is that a preference, right? What do you value more? I feel like that's a preference, right? Because, I care about my health. I try to eat healthy, right? And that's not a choice that I can make for somebody, right? That's something that we both have to have in common in order for it to be a standard. It has to be something we both have in common, a mutual understanding on that thing, and then from there, that can just be, our standard, right? And then the cool thing about it is, because we have that standard, I have that like that mutual, that common thing, we can have each other and hold each other accountable to that standard if we kind of miss the mark. You know what I mean? Like, oh, going to family oriented, right? If my partner thinks I'm spending too much time away from the kids or something like that, she can hold me accountable. Or if, the belief systems, you're kind of falling away from our beliefs, you're going this way, and whatever, she could pull me back and hold me accountable, right? Even like the health thing, if we both go running, or we both have like are on a diet or something, like, oh, well, you had a cheat day, or we forgot to go running this morning, or whatever, you already haven't been running, in the past few months, or you haven't been, keeping up. That's not a bad thing. It's just, just holding each other accountable and striving to meet goals together, right? In that aspect, right? So a preference, it all comes down to what you value the most in somebody. So that's my 2 cents on standards versus preferences. I had an idea of what I wanted to talk about next time, but I guess I'll just have to let you guys know, because I also have to edit this later, and I barely have time to do that nowadays. So yeah, I guess until next time, yeah, I'll see you guys around.